Good morning everyone, my name's Titus and I'm here to continue our camera system prototype mini-series with part 5. In the last video we played around with blueprint interfaces to create an alarm state in our game that triggered multiple objects to run different code. In this video, we'll create a simple aim and shoot mechanic so we can explore disabling or even destroying our camera system. Let's jump right into it. Alright, so in order to get a shoot mechanic, we're gonna need a gun. So I have a Blender file that I made a while ago for a taser rifle. So I'm just gonna simply create a new folder, call it _meshes, and I'm just gonna import that asset. So you can just drag and drop your FBX file in. You can download one from the web. There's plenty of, should be some free ones on the Epic Marketplace as well. So any gun object will work really. That's going to take a little bit. So to get our shoot mechanic and our aim mechanic working, I'm going to have to create like a first person perspective state because we're using the third person template. So we don't have a way to really control the aim in third person. So we'll basically swap perspectives so we can actually hit the camera. So I'll show you that in a second though. Alright, so we got our gun imported. So now we're going to be going into the third person blueprint. And we'll dock that into our main screen here. Alright, and let's set up the controller scheme first. So if you're using the third person template, there's an input folder. And it has the IMC manager as well as the individual actions. So the enhanced input section is actually pretty useful. I recommend I'll probably do a video on it too, but a lot of people are kind of skipping this, but it's got a lot of great functionality in it, so I recommend kind of looking into it. So essentially what you do is you create your input actions and then you set them up in the manager. And then you can call those functions in your actual blueprint code. So for us, we're going to go right click and go to input. And then create a new input action. We'll call it IA_aim. And then we're also going to right click, go to input and create another input action and call it IA_shoot. Or fire, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. You don't actually have to change anything in them. I think the defaults will be fine for us for now. But what you will need to do is actually go into the IMC default manager. And under mappings, you're going to have to actually create the mappings. So we can just add another one. And then you'll see you can map it to the new input action you created. So I'll do aim on this one. I think for aim, I'm going to use my right mouse. So I can just click this and then click my right mouse. And it'll put it in there for me. We can add some modifiers and triggers, which we probably will do depending on the behavior. But we'll wait to kind of see how it looks. And then we'll create our second one for our shoot. So the aim is going to be the right mouse, and then I'm going to make the shoot the left mouse. And I think that's good for now. And that pretty much completes at least our controller setup. So now we can go back into our third person blueprint and we got to add in our gun. So under the mesh, we'll highlight that because I'm going to put the gun as a child of the mesh. You can probably do it anywhere. But I'm going to be parenting it to the mesh socket as well to get a little bit of a, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll see how it goes. But yeah, let me select my mesh that I imported. I'm going to do the skeletal mesh here. And then when I go into the add function, it'll make a reference to the skeletal mesh taser rifle. And it'll add it into my viewport for me automatically. And then I think actually for now, just to make this simple, I'm just going to drag it and rotate it. Kind of like that. Yeah, that looks okay. Obviously, normally you'd want animations to actually be able to control this, and then set a like a pivot point, like a parent socket. If I were to select like a right hand or a left hand, let's do hand. This would actually parent it. It's got an offset now, but if it didn't have the offset, it'd be basically wherever your pivot point is, it'd bring it to the hand, and then you get that jitter and rotation, and then whatever animation you set up, like say you were working in Blender or 3ds Max or Maya or whatever your animation software you're working in, whatever animations you set, you'd export those and create like a blend space and call it. So that's the better way to do it, but that's also very long and it's a lot of work. So we're just gonna do a simple thing for our prototype just to see if it works. But yeah, so we have the gun in our mesh. So if we compile and save and play, I can now run around and I have a gun. So I can't shoot anything yet. I'm going to create a separate blueprint instance for our bullet, but I need to get a reference point to be able to spawn that bullet on where I want it to shoot. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to select the taser rifle, and I'm just going to add an empty object. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm going to use an arrow, and I'm just going to call it bullet spawn. You could probably use anything. You can use a cube, a sphere, an empty. Just make sure it doesn't show in game, and that way you can just have a reference to get a transform or a rotation or a location, so you can spawn your bullet. So I'm going to then place my arrow at the muzzle of the gun. It's going to take a little bit of doing here. Alright, so, and then down. Alright, and then I'm going to set my snapping off so I can get a little bit finer control here. And I think right there is probably pretty good. It spawns at the pivot point, so that'll be where the bullet is, and I think right there is probably good enough for what I need. But yeah. Okay, so we now have our gun created, and we have our spawn point. So we can probably begin writing the code. So in the event graph, we'll go to the bottom where there's some space, and we can right click and do input action underscore, and we can see all the input actions that we have. So we're going to be doing shoot, and we're also going to be doing aim. All right, but let's get the shoot mechanic going first. So you simply just drag off here, and you can do spawn actor from class. We don't have the class created yet, but that's okay. We're going to get a reference to our bullet spawn. From our bullet spawn, we can get two pieces of information. We can get our forward vector, and we can get our location. So we can drag off this, get world location, and drag off this again, get forward vector. From the forward vector, we can get our X vector, because we only need to basically go forward, and that'll give us our rotation value. So we can get a rotation, and then we can get a transform, because we have the rotation, we have the location, and we're not messing with the scale. So basically a transform is a location, a rotation, and a scale. But since we're not messing with the scale, we don't really need to reference it in any way. So from this, we can make transform. And we only need the X vector. Rotation from X vector. And then we can plug in our rotation value. We can plug in our location value. We're not scaling it, so we just kind of leave it the same. And then you can just return your actual transform. Now we can't actually complete this code because we don't have a class to spawn yet. So if I try to compile, it'll error out. So let's go ahead and work on that. So we'll go to blueprints. We'll just right click. We'll create a basic blueprint class of type actor. Call it BP underscore bullet. And then for the bullet, I'm just gonna add a sphere. Call it bullet. And I'm just gonna compress him in the Y and the Z. I think I'm gonna go 0.1. Actually, maybe I'll make it a little bit more. So maybe 0.08. There we go. That looks kind of like I guess I'll make a laser bullet. Since we're gonna be doing collision checking, we might as well add a capsule collider or a box collider or a sphere collider, whatever collider you want to use, but it's gonna need something. So we'll do capsule collision, and I will call this my trigger capsule. And I can then rotate it 90 degrees, and I can begin kind of the radius. I think I'm gonna try cutting that in half. Maybe 7, and maybe 5. There you go. And then for the height, I'll maybe try 50, and that looks pretty good. The reason we need the trigger capsule is so we have a way, when we fire the bullet, when it hits something, that's basically how you calculate the code, right? So when it overlaps, we can generate an event from the overlap event and then run our code. Basically just kind of like that. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can move this thing in world space, but Unreal Engine makes it very easy. You can just, there's actually a component. There's a component for rotation, movement, and projectiles, if I remember right. If you scroll all the way down, yeah, projectiles. So you have, it's got a bunch of default scripts, I guess, that'll control some very common things. You don't always have to write, your code from scratch. You can use a lot of the built-in things. So we'll just add the projectile movement, and then from the projectile, you can actually give it an initial speed. You can mess with the gravity scale, all sorts of things, whether it bounces, lots of things. So I'm gonna try a initial speed of 3,000, max speed 3,500, and I don't want a lot of gravity, so I'm gonna maybe do a 0.5. Now, if you want to see what this thing looks like when it fires, you can just hit simulate. That drops a little too quickly, and it also feels a little bit slow. So maybe let's try 0.1. That seems kind of okay. Let's start with that. We might mess with the values a little bit more, but let's also give a little bit of life to our bullet. Let's create a material. So right click, material, call it M underscore bullet. And we're gonna need a constant 3 for a color. So you can go to your palette, look for constant 3 vector, drag it out, and you can just click on the picture. And let's do red, why not? And like that. I'm gonna plug this into the emissive, but I wanna kind of be able to upscale it. So I'm gonna use a multiply node. You can just hold M and click into the graph, and it'll add a multiplier node. You can also get it from your palette thing on the right there. Drag in your color node into A. I'm going to right click on channel B and promote to a parameter and call this my brightness, because I might mess with that a little bit later. Default value, I'm going to try 100. Pop this into emissive, and yep, that's pretty much the effect I was looking for. So it looks good there. We can go back to our bullet. Under the bullet mesh, we can tell it to use M underscore bullet. There you go. And that's looking much like a bullet. So now that we're not going to mess with or create the code in the bullet yet. We'll do that probably in a later video because this is already getting a little bit long. But we'll go back to the third person character. under our spawn actor, you can set that to your BP underscore bullet. And then if you compile and save, you'll notice we don't get the error, or the compile error goes away. So yeah, so we can hit play, and there you go. You got some, seems a little bit slow to me. Also, there's another issue. If you if you just hold the mouse in, it kind of goes a little bit crazy. I don't know if I quite like that, so I think we'll fix that. I don't know, it just seems a little bit slow, and it does fall, well, maybe a little bit too quickly. So let's go back into our bullet, BP bullet, and under the projectile movement, I am gonna bump the initial speed to maybe 5,000, and maybe try max. I don't like making the max the same as the initial. I don't want to get any weird errors. And then for the gravity scale, I'm probably gonna go 0.5. Yeah, that seems, yeah, it seems a little bit better. Okay. Now we got to fix the trigger. I just want to be able to click once and it fires. I don't want it to kind of go all crazy. So in the IMC manager, under our shoot function, or our shoot mapping, if you expand out, there's a trigger field. You can add one, and the one we're looking for, I think, is pressed. And if we save that, I think if you hold it, yeah, so now it only fires one. So if the player wants to shoot, they'll have to basically click multiple times. But yeah, now we need to figure out the aiming part of it. Also with real quick with the manager, if you wanted to add like controller support, under the shoot and the aim, just add another key. There is a gamepad section. If I was going to do the shoot, it would probably be the right trigger. So you can set that up. And then it has the same mappings. You can tell it to only do where it doesn't spray when you're holding the trigger down, or maybe that's what you want, but you can restrict it the same way. And then under the aim, if I was to do it, I would probably add a left trigger. Gamepad left trigger for the aim. And then you can add your controller functions there, which is pretty nice. I actually love the enhanced input section that they released in the, I think it was 5.0 or maybe 5.1, but yeah, this is excellent. So I'm a big fan. But yeah, let's finish off our aiming code. So we're just gonna make a basic aim. The proper way to do aiming is definitely to do it through like a blend space with proper animations. So this one's definitely gonna have its drawbacks. And I'll kind of go over those with you, but it'll work for our purposes just for this prototype. So in order to get the aiming system, I'm gonna need to create a Boolean. So I'm gonna create a variable, called it isAiming. And then I'm going to drag this off and do a set twice. And then I'm also gonna mess with the movement speed. So if you right click, I think you can do set, actually no, you have to get a reference. So you can drag out your character movement, and then off that, you can drag off and do set movement speed. Maybe it's walk speed. Yeah, I think it's walk speed, set max walk speed. And then I'm gonna copy that. So I have that one twice. I want to slow the character down when they're aiming. I don't want them to be able to go full speed. If you need to see the default values, you can just click on the character movement, and the values should be on your right-hand side. So somewhere in here, max walk speed, that's the one. So 500 centimeters per second. So that's the default value, so we'll put that down here. And then I'm gonna slow them down to maybe 200. And then for the isAiming, when it's triggered, it's gonna be true. When it's done, it's gonna be false. So I'll hook up my trigger execution pin and then my completed execution pin, and then just follow the line. Kind of like that. Now, in order to get the aiming to work, we need another camera. So we got our third-person camera. We're gonna need a first-person camera to be able to switch. So we're gonna do this kind of the, I guess the dirty way. So we'll click into our mesh and we'll add a camera component. Call it FP camera for first-person camera. Do FPP maybe, first-person perspective, however you want to do it. And then what I'm gonna do is I like parenting the camera to the actual body, so you can get the I guess kind of the body wiggle or the the jiggle for it. It just adds a little personality to the camera. So under the parent socket, just look for maybe head, and you can already see it's kind of moving around. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. If you press, we got to rotate it correctly. So let's maybe set it right here, 90 degrees. And so now we'll probably want to move it a little, whoops, always do that. Click into the viewport first. And I don't want to see the back of the mesh's head, so I'm going to bring it forward just a bit. And I think that I can get away with that. Whoops, I have an error over here. Oh, okay, max walk speed. Let's plug that in there. All right, so the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna get a reference to our FB camera here, and we'll get a reference to our original third-person camera here. And then we are just gonna drag off and do set active. So like I said, we're just gonna kind of be quick and dirty about this. And then drag off this, set active. And we can then highlight these, copy pasta, drag this down, and hook up our execution pins. Just follow the path. So when we hold the aim button, we want to set the first person camera to true and the third person camera to false or not active. When we let go or when we finish, we want to set the first person camera to false and the third person camera to true. And with just that bit of code, it'll function. It's not going to look right. It's still not going to work right, but at least get a look. So now I'm in game. If I hold right mouse, oh, I think I forgot to rotate the camera correctly, but you can see we're getting a view of kind of like the gun here, and we're getting the wiggle. If we let go, we go back and we're in third person. So, but I still can't aim around. I can only, I guess, control the yaw. I can't adjust the pitch, so we need to fix that. And we also need to fix our rotation. So if we go back to our viewport, I can kind of see it already. I think the little thing needs to be up. So let's rotate this guy this way, 90 degrees. So it's negative 90 in the X. So now if we real quick play that again, there you go. That's more like what we're looking for. But I still can't adjust the pitch, so I'm not gonna be able to hit the camera, right? So it doesn't really help me too much. So in order to do that, after you set your cameras, you can actually just adjust the movement component. There's a use controller pitch and yaw. So you want to do both those, and you want to do it as a set, not a get. We're not gonna mess with the roll because it doesn't really make sense because the camera roll isn't gonna help you. So pitch and yaw are what you're gonna want to do. So we'll do a set on that for the pitch, and then use controller yaw, and we'll do the set for that. And then you can just copy these. So when we are in first person mode, which is the top, we'll want these to be true. When we're in third person mode, we'll want these to be false. And that is pretty much it. So I think if we select this code, we can comment this. FB aim. And the code up here is commented. We can call it taser fire, I guess. And there's our badass character right there. All right, so this isn't a great movement thing. There's a reason why you want to do this with like blend spaces, but it'll work. So now I can actually control the pitch and yaw. I can shoot around. I can maybe add a crosshair through a widget and actually give like, you know, you can do all sorts of things from just this point. The reason it's bad is because it doesn't, it inherits whatever pitch and yaw you have after you leave the view. So like if I do this, you can see I'm running a little goofy. So I'd have to like aim back, put it straight before it goes away. I mean, there's a few different ways you might be able to work around that. Like you might be able to get the values of the pitch and yaw before you go into first person mode and then just lerp back to them when you exit. That would work in a first person game. It wouldn't work in a third person because when you're actually in first person, like shooting, the other players are going to see this, you know, because you're just because you don't see it doesn't mean like nothing else in the game sees it, right? So so yeah, definitely not a good way or not a good character movement script that I have, but it's good enough just for this prototype. So it's better to do it through animation and blend spaces, but that's a topic for another video, I suspect. But yeah, all right, good people, that concludes this video, and we'll expand on the project in a later video. We'll also implement the collision code in the next one to disable and destroy our camera systems. So if you found any of these topics helpful, please leave a like and a sub, help grow the channel. And as always, thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.